According to the Old Testament, there exists in the depths of the ocean a gigantic creature. Its name is Leviathan. Just like all creatures that walk the earth, fly in the air, and swim in the waters, the Leviathan was also a creation of God. The beast would resemble an enormous sea dragon. At the sight of it, men are seized with fear. No man is brave enough to dare awaken such a creature, for the very idea of defeating it would be a pure illusion. God himself describes the mighty Leviathan as a colossal creature endowed with incredible power. As the massive monster moves, it creates enormous waves. Its powerful mouth displays fearsome teeth, and its back is protected by rows of shields so closely joined that not even air can pass between them. The Leviathan has a mighty breath that shoots flashes of light. Fire comes from its mouth, and smoke flows from its nostrils. When such a beast rises, even the most powerful flee in terror, for swords, spears, and arrows can do nothing against a creature whose chest is as hard as the most resistant stone. Nothing on earth can compare to the Leviathan's power. Yet such a creature owes its existence to the will of God, for like all beings, the Leviathan can only obtain its food through God's grace. According to the Bible, there was a man named Job. He seemed to lead a life blessed by God, wealthy, healthy, respected by his peers, and with many children. But this man lost everything: his children, his possessions, his health, all thanks to Satan's malice, who wished to put his faith in God to the test. In his despair, he cried out to the heavens for answers, questioning divine justice and wanting to understand why all this was happening to him. Then, out of a whirlwind, God responded, but he did not offer simple explanations. Instead, he presented Job with a demonstration of pure, incomprehensible power, and the central figure of this demonstration was the Leviathan. In chapter 41 of the book of Job, the text describes a creature that is the embodiment of untamable power. "Can you pull in the Leviathan with a fishhook?" God asks Job sarcastically. The answer is a resounding no. God says the creature makes the depths boil like a pot and leaves a glistening wake on the sea. Nothing on earth is its equal. A creature without fear. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is king over all the proud. This is not just an animal. It is a force of nature, a symbol of primordial chaos. For theologians and historians, the Leviathan did not emerge from nowhere. It is the heir to a long lineage of chaos monsters from the mythologies of the ancient Near East. Figures like Lotan in Canaanite mythology, or Tiamat, the dragon goddess of chaos in Babylon, represented the primordial, disordered forces that the gods of order had to defeat to create the world. This concept is known as the divine battle against chaos. By presenting the Leviathan to Job, God is not merely boasting of his creation. He is making a profound theological statement. He is saying to Job, "You, a mere mortal, cannot even comprehend, much less control, this creature. How then do you dare question my designs, which govern the entire universe?" The Leviathan is living proof of God's sovereignty and of the limits of human understanding. It is chaos contained, a terrifying power that only divine authority can master. But did the Leviathan really exist? Many have tried to identify it with real creatures. Was it a giant Nile crocodile, a whale, or for the more imaginative, a surviving dinosaur like the pliosaur? The truth is that, while the description may have been inspired by real animals, its importance was never zoological. The Leviathan is an archetype, a symbol. It represents what is beyond our control, nature's fury and the terror of the unknown. It is the king over all the proud, a reminder that in the face of the raw power of the cosmos, our arrogance is useless. It is precisely this image of absolute, untamable power that centuries later would be revived in a completely different context, not to describe nature, but to define civilization itself. Fast forward about 2,000 years. We are now in 17th century England, a country engulfed in the bloody chaos of civil war. Brother fights brother, the king's authority is challenged and beheaded, and society seems to be falling apart. In this climate of disorder and fear, philosopher Thomas Hobbes, exiled in Paris, takes up his pen to write the work that would define his life and forever change political philosophy, Leviathan, or the matter, form, and power of a commonwealth, ecclesiastical and civil. Why would Hobbes choose the name of a biblical monster for his treatise on government? Because to him, the chaos England faced was a return to a state of nature, and Hobbes's state of nature is a terrifying place. Without laws, without government, without an authority to impose order, human life would be a war of all against all. In such a state, there would be no place for industry, culture, navigation, or comfort, only continual fear and danger of violent death. And human life, in Hobbes's famous and brutal phrase, would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. This is primordial chaos, not in the seas, but within us, in human society itself. How to escape this hell? Hobbes proposed a radical solution, the social contract. To ensure survival and secure peace, rational individuals would agree to give up part of their natural freedom, their right to do whatever they pleased. They would transfer that right to a central sovereign authority. This sovereign authority is the Leviathan. For Hobbes, the Leviathan is the state. It is an artificial man, an entity created by humans for their own protection. To function, this state must have almost absolute, unquestionable power. It must be as powerful and fearsome as the biblical monster, so that no one dares challenge it and risk a return to the war of all against all. Hobbes's Leviathan is a mortal god to whom we owe our peace and defense. It is king over all the proud, no longer in the literal sense, but in the sense that its authority overrules the pride and selfish interests of each individual. The original cover of Hobbes's book is one of philosophy's most iconic images. It depicts a giant whose crown represents sovereignty. His body is made up of thousands of tiny individuals, all facing his head, symbolizing that the sovereign's power comes from the people who consented to be governed. In one hand, he holds a sword, the symbol of civil and military power. In the other, a bishop's crozier, the symbol of religious power. For Hobbes, this union of powers was crucial. The English Civil War was fueled in large part by religious disputes. Thus, to guarantee peace, the Leviathan also had to have final authority over the church. Religion could not be a source of division and conflict that threatened the state's stability. Hobbes's Leviathan is therefore the antithesis of the biblical monster. While the first is untamable chaos, the second is imposed order. One is nature in its wildest form. The other is civilization in its most controlled form. Hobbes took the greatest symbol of disorder he could find and turned it into the greatest symbol of order, a masterstroke that forces us to face an uncomfortable question. To be saved from chaos, must we create our own monster? So, is the Leviathan merely a mythological relic and a 17th century philosophical concept? Or does this giant, made of people and power, still walk among us? The answer is a resounding yes. Every time we discuss the role of the state, we are discussing the Leviathan. Modern governments are our Leviathans. We give them power, the power to tax, to make laws, to imprison us, and ultimately to use force in exchange for security, infrastructure, health, and education. Hobbes's social contract is alive and well, renewed with every election and every parliamentary debate. But the Leviathan's shadow also looms over our deepest fears about power. When does the state become too big? When does the quest for security turn into oppression? Surveillance cameras on every corner, monitoring of our online activities, mass data collection, all done in the name of safety, to protect us from the chaos of terror and crime. But where do we draw the line? The Leviathan was created to protect us, but who protects us from the Leviathan? This is the central tension of modern politics, the eternal struggle between individual freedom and state authority. The image of the Leviathan has also escaped the pages of philosophy and entered pop culture, proving its enduring power as an archetype. It appears in countless forms. In video games, from colossal bosses in series like Final Fantasy and God of War to terrifying deep-sea creatures in games like Subnautica. In film and literature, inspiring gigantic monsters that represent nature's fury or existential threats to humanity. In art, such as in artist Anish Kapoor's monumental installation Leviathan, a massive inflatable structure that swallowed visitors, making them feel small and insignificant, perhaps like Job before the biblical monster, or like a citizen before the overwhelming power of the state. The Leviathan endures because it embodies two fundamental and opposing truths about the human experience. It is the chaos we fear and the order we desire. It is the force of nature that can destroy us and the machine of power we create to save ourselves. Looking at the society we live in, at our governments, and at our own choices, we may realize that the body of the Leviathan is made of all of us. And the head that commands it, for better or for worse, is the one we ourselves put in place.